Hi, everyone. This is Sonja Robinson hosting the Sun Talk Radio Show, Sustainable Urban Network, Saturdays at 3 p.m. on GODRadio1.com for us to scale up our neighborhoods.
Tune in to Sun Sustainable Urban Network Talk Radio Show on GODRadio1.com. Get up, get out, and get green. We can't let Earth pass us by. We got to scale up our neighborhood, y'all.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another day in Sun, Sustainable Urban Network. Happy Sun Saturday. You could be anywhere, and we appreciate you joining us today. Now, today's topic is what Sustainable Urban Network, SUN, is all about. It is environmental justice, and I have an all-star Marvel Avengers crew panel that's really going to shed some information, increase our awareness, and really bring us in a dialogue and a discussion of why environmental justice is so important to our communities, the Black and Brown BIPOC communities. So as you're watching us, checking us out, drop us a line, let us know where you're at. As you know, here on SUN, we really encourage forward thinking and action and behaviors to really scale up our neighborhoods, to improve the quality of our lives. So as we always do, we're going to go ahead and run into our reflection. And our reflection is intended to really set the pace of what we're going to be talking about, what the topic show is. In addition to that, we're going to share our Sun enlightenments. And then we're going to talk about what's happening, what's going on, some announcements, and then we're going to break down into this all-star panel discussion on environmental justice and why environmental justice is also racial and social justice as well. So as we always do, now is time for us to talk, or for me to share what our Sun reflection is for today's show. And our reflection reads as such. There's this narrative that Blacks aren't interested in the environment. How can you not be interested in the land you walk on, the air you breathe, the water you drink? And that quote is by Dr. Dorcetta Taylor from the University of Michigan. Now on to our Sun enlightenments. And our Sun enlightenments are inspired by our modern thought teacher, Don Miguel Ruiz. And our Sun enlightenments are as such. 1, be responsible with your resources. 2, take the state of our environment, racial and social justice seriously. 3, don't wait for others, do your part. And 4, when you do, give it your best effort and from a loving heart. Now, what's going on? Well, I'm so excited about this show because, again, this show really highlights why SUN is even in existence, right? So environmental justice is more impactful to our neighborhoods, the Black neighborhoods, the brown neighborhoods, our BIPOC, people of color, indigenous. But before, again, I introduce this fabulous panel, let me let you know a little bit of what's going on in the world today. So just so you know, on November 17th, there was a vote on a local legislative item for the county president of San Diego. And this came from the County Democrat Central Committee. So I do got to put a shout out to Monica Montgomery. She is our council president, and she is running for council president for San Diego's council. And so we really want to encourage people to support her candidacy for council president. And I will have to say, when I attended that meeting, it was overwhelmingly support in every district of San Diego. All 9 people called in to put their support behind Monica Montgomery's step. Also, on the same day, one of our panelists, John, he did a presentation on environmental racism, and he rocked it. And he's really going to bring some of that same information to share today. Now, what's going on here nationally? I have to say, from a fossil shade perspective, that the United States have an oath of honor to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And you guys know what's going on right now in that White House with 45. So right now, I have to say, jumping ahead of time, he gets the fossil shade. The whole administration keeping up all this nonsense. Who else could keep up some dirt and craziness like that? So if you take the oath that you have to defend the Constitution, both domestically as well as international or foreign, make sure that our rights are still protected as this transition is supposed to be underway. All right, announcements. Our next show next week is going to be our youth. So make sure you tune in onto that. Now, Sunrise Movement's December 9th climate strike. That's going to be December 6th. And that's their report card. And they're rating all elected officials on the topics of social justice, racial justice, and today's topic, environmental justice, and how they intersect. In addition, the North County Climate Change Alliance also has an activity or event actually took place today. It was really good and very informative. In addition to that, I want to announce that our county for Live Well Advance is having a conference for community organizations related to environmental justice again. In addition to that, one of our panelists, John, and his partner has a matching mentoring program. We want to make sure that you guys hear about this. And this is about matching those that are interested in technology and environmental justice, as well as artificial intelligence. So making sure that we pull in our youth and we have pairing mentors for those that are interested in this work. So before I introduce this all-star, fabulous, Papio Collar Environmental Avengers panel, we're going to have our topic theme song, and we're going to dive right into today's topic. Actually, it's about global warming. So some of you guys are familiar with Childish Gambino. And so the topic is really, again, and as well as what this show is about, is really engaging our urban communities related about environmental justice. So kicking off our show, I would like to introduce Dr. Puja Batra. She is an ecologist as well as environmental like structure scientist. She really works and focuses on our ecosystem and what's important about our ecosystem. And one of her passions is including the BIPOC communities in these discussions on science and justice and bringing those together. Welcome, Puja. In addition to her, we have Mr. Lafayette Jefferson. He is the president of the NAACP Petersburg branch. He's also a doctoral student of the Virginia Union University at the Samuel Dwight Proctor School of Theology. In addition to him, we all have Dr. Keisha Clark. She is also a coach, resilience coach. She's a diversity trainer, and she is just fabulous in all her ways. In addition to her, we have Mr. John Brooks. He's a retired special agent with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, film director, author. And he also works with ClimateCon and the discussion of topic that we're having today. So as we get started on this discussion, I want to open up by asking, how would you describe environmental justice, and what's a key component to achieving this justice for the Black and Brown communities? Lafayette, would you like to start us off on this discussion?
Okay. All right. So first, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're defining climate justice
Environmental.
and how it affects environmental justice, how it affects Black and Brown communities. Environmental justice, to me, is ensuring that people have the ability to live, and within the scope of being able to live, having clean air, having clean water, having healthy places to live. And in order for that to happen in Black and Brown communities, I think that Black and Brown communities actually need more of a voice when it comes to the placement of these organizations, such as landfills, power plants, agriculture farms. And yeah, it's the people need to be involved. Organizations are fine, but once people get involved, that's when real change happens.
I couldn't agree with you more. Puja, and then also John, would you also like to chime in and kind of give your thoughts on what environmental justice means? What are some of those key components and how we can achieve that for the Black and Brown communities?
Sure, I will add a couple of things, and everything that Lafayette just said, but also ensuring, what Lafayette said was, you know, ensuring that Black and brown people have the basics of clean water, clean air, healthy environments. So what I would add to that is that that means righting some wrongs, reversing some structural inequities that definitely in an urban context and most definitely in a rural context as well, because you mentioned agriculture. That means looking at historical trajectories that have created what we see now, which are huge imbalances in who is living in those places with clean air, clean water, and healthy spaces versus who is not, and where are Black and brown people living? What, you know, and we see correlations between BIPOC communities, residential communities, and polluted environments, polluting industries, lack of investment in urban facilities and urban services. And so environmental justice to me means addressing those structural inequities and fixing them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Puja. I appreciate it. John, could you also share your thoughts if you have anything else to add? If not, we can move on.
Sure. Just a couple of things I'd like to add is one is don't assume that we're not interested in this topic.
Absolutely.
First, and it's throughout history, we've just been excluded from the conversation. There needs to be inclusion in everything that we do as a community, and I mean the nation. And so when these power plants or agricultural waste dumps and should be placed in a community, we need to be included in that, and also basically giving a seat at the table.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think what you just said really is a good segue in hearing from Dr. Keisha that actually works in a space of diversity and inclusion. So would you like to share your thoughts on this, Dr. Keisha? Oh, she froze up on me.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you. Well, I think. Okay, well, we're going to come back to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so did you say anything? Because I don't hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
There was a lag.
okay. Looks like I'm having some technical difficulties, but you can hear me, okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, look how she froze
If I'm frozen,
again.
you can still hear me.
Yes. Okay, so we can't hear you, so we'll come back to you, Dr. Keisha. So now that we're, okay.
You're back.
Okay, go ahead now. We're family, go ahead. Okay, she froze up again. Uh-oh.
Just come back to me. I'm not sure what's going on. Just come back to me.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay.
So now when we're looking at just in general of like environmental justice, another aspect of what's really important and where you're hearing a lot of dialogue around is climate change. And how does climate change impact our life? How does climate change impact our environment? How does it impact our community? John, can you share your thoughts on that?
Sure. That there's a saying that says what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, but what goes on in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. And the reason I'm talking about the Arctic Circle is because that area of the Earth is warming at a rate 2 to 3 times faster than we're feeling things down here. And you have to keep in mind weather and climate are two different things. Weather is something we as humans experience on a daily basis, where the climate is what the Earth experiences over time. So what's happening in the Arctic is ice is melting at an alarming rate, which is going to cause extreme weather patterns down here where we're feeling increased sea levels, more infectious diseases, increased amount of hurricanes, which we're already seeing. And that in turn And I totally forgot what the question was because I was like on a roll. What did you say the question?
Bro, whatever you want to share with us.
I was going some other direction. I want to come back to what you said.
No, I just asked, how does climate change impact our lives, right? How does it
Right.
impact our community?
So the impact is the fact that we are seeing these things now, and then people in the lower and marginalized community areas will experience these changes at a rate faster than those people who are rich.
Now explain that. Explain that, because we know that's factual, but our communities really need to hear that. Can you really explain why? Because it's like we contribute the least to our environmental damages and the whole climate, but yet the burden is mainly on our shoulders. So can you please kind of dive into why that's the case? We
contribute like 10% of the greenhouse gases that are emitted into the atmosphere, where the top 10% does 50%, and then the rest are businesses and earth type things. But we're living, going back to the environmental justice and the first question you asked, we're living in these communities where the effect of the environment is felt at a greater rate, for instance, like air pollution, right? So we're in poorer areas where people don't have access to vehicles that are like up to environmental standards. They're polluting more, they have to drive, they don't have access to public transportation. The sewer systems aren't up to speed. The water pipes are not, we're not getting the services that our tax money is paying for, basically. That's the United States. The rest of the world is a whole different story, but sort of the same thing, but in a different type of thing. Like in India, they're very rural in some areas, and their lands are subject to flooding first from the Ganges River or something like that. Where here, it's more the air. The air is polluted more, and then kids are food deserts, which you heard that term before, no access to really good, healthy types of food, and stereotypes keep perpetuating, where we're doing the same thing over and over and over again, which is not leading us to any type of solution out of the situation.
Right. And oftentimes we're not there. So you said a lot, and Puja, he also, mentioned India. And that's where you're from. And I know we've had discussions on this as well. Would you like to kind of talk about how the climate change and the ecosystem, since you are an ecologist, and kind of how that kind of gets together?
Yeah, sure. If we look specifically at the urban environment, and because I work in with ecosystems and ecosystem conservation, I'm going to stick with that. I don't know that much about air pollution and water pollution other than the generals, but if we look at the urban environment and green spaces, whether they're parks or the green strip in front of along the sidewalk in many neighborhoods, urban trees, shrubs, things that are on public lands, like city-owned property. So if you were to look at, when we look at satellite imagery, for example, of the city of San Diego, we can see, the treetops, and you can see where, in big chunks, where the greenery is and where it is not. And that correlates very strongly with the non-green areas that are more concrete. That correlates very strongly with patterns of historical redlining. And so Black and brown communities. So Southeast San Diego, the border, the part of San Diego right along the border, those are very gray when it comes to, concrete versus greenery. And those are, so it goes back to a pattern of historical redlining and underinvestment by both private and public sectors in those parts of town. And so they fall into disrepair, and they're neglected by city investments and services. And, all that greening, those are investments by the city and by property owners. And so, so that leads to a pattern that we see. So there's the pattern of where the green is and where the green isn't, and that overlays with the pattern of where BIPOC communities live and in predominantly, and where they predominantly don't live.
And a lot what you just described, and I want to continue to hear you, but just for our listeners, that's what they call the concrete jungle, right? Like you kept talking about the concrete, and that's another, definition is the concrete jungle. So continue.
So what that leads to, getting back to the point that John was making about climate change and how does it disproportionately affect Black and Brown communities, places with more concrete and less absorptive greenery are hotter. They get much hot. So we experience this, what's called the urban heat island effect. And so there's a lot of absorption of heat during the day on the surfaces, and then it reflects out at night. And so the temperatures in those areas are much hotter than they are in areas that have more greenery. And so that affects, what does that affect? That affects people's health. That affects whether people want to go outside. So you're not going to be walking even if it's close by because it's too hot and it's bright and it's reflecting all the time. So you walk less, which means if you're walking less, you don't see your neighbors, you don't socialize, you don't have that community feeling as much. There's more pollution because the trees are not filtering out some of those particulates, so your health is worse. If it's hotter, you're going to be, your electricity bills are higher because you've got cooling and you've got, and it's also cooler under some circumstances. So anyway, your cooling bills are much higher. So there are all these consequences that we can trace back to redlining.
Which is injustice, right? Which is,
right.
Right.
And so these structural injustices have this legacy, and it's just a vicious cycle that, like, when we understand the causes, we have to figure out how do we break them. And so we have to start talking about equity. And I know that, like, that's maybe that's something that, Keisha, hopefully we can hear you now.
I think Lafayette also wanted to say something. Did you want to chime in on this discussion?
Oh, sure. It's not only redlining, but it's also, I would say, a lot of the laws that were made. Because I can tell you that in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia, in the 50s, 60s, around that time frame, they outlawed people from having chicken coops in their backyards and growing gardens in their yards.
Oh, wow.
And so that would pretty much get, the only option you would have is to buy from grocery stores. And so with the global warming that we are seeing, that we are experiencing, our sources for getting food are limited.
Right.
And then someone told me a while ago that the bananas we eat today aren't even the bananas that we originally ate, that we're eating some kind of hybrid something.
Right.
But
corn too.
Right. To limit our food sources, that's not a cool deal. But I would say that within Black and Brown communities, I am digging how a lot of us are going vegan and planting our own gardens and actually paying closer attention to our health. And I even got friends say, if they want to find me for growing a garden, we're going to fight it out in court.
Good.
We need a new precedent anyway. Mm-hmm. And so how people are using that righteous indignation to not only fight for their health, but for the health of their communities and their families.
Great. Dr. Keisha, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Two things. One, there's a guy in LA who started a garden right on the strips because it wasn't being utilized, and they tried to stop him. And it was a great story because of everything you just said. And also, I think another thing, going back to what Puja said, is there's again that perception that we don't care. So, okay, well, they don't care. They don't need the trees. They don't need their parks fixed. And they're no more neglected over and over in time. And then that also gets in our psyche that this is our normal and this is how we live. This is okay. So.
Right. And that's a historical example of cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are not logical, because we are people of the sun, whether you're black or brown, and we have always had a connection to the land.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are narratives that we need to turn around and correct.
Right. I totally agree with you. Keisha, did you want to share any of your thoughts on this discussion as well? Look like you're on mute, sis.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I can't see you all right now, but it's okay. You can hear me.
Yes, and we can see you.
Okay, excellent. I can't see you. I'm having problems, but I do have things to say. Thank you for the panelists and what they've already gave, that I can just say. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, you just froze
That
up.
I can just say amen, amen, and amen.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Come back to me.
I sure will. So I want to hear, so I know that there's been some, again, our environmental climate, justice fight. I want to, just give some props and actually share my gratitude for the support and work that I have some, committee members right here on our panel, both, Dr. Puja Batra and John Brooks. So thank you guys for being, part of the committee. The work and the fight that we've been doing a lot here in San Diego. But I'm also really interested, and I would love Lafayette to share the work that he has done out there in his areas as is related to environmental justice, the work he's done, with the water company and all that. Can you kind of share that with us, bro?
Okay, we had a water company that tried to privatize our water and sewer system. And one of the things I speak about when I'm teaching community organizing is to use your creativity. And so with the water company, they had a terrible track record in many, many states. And so whenever we mentioned water in relation to them, we would say zombie water. And we created a website called zombiewater.org. And what that did was change the narrative, because if you're a parent, if you have a family, or if you're living by yourself and you're just drinking the water for yourself and using the water for yourself, there is a relation. People know what zombies are, and people know what water is. And to put those together created an image in people's mind and enabled us to get a tremendous amount of support to fight a water company, city of 32,000, fight a water company that that clears $90 million in profit per quarter. After we beat them, we had a landfill. A lot of us were still, high on that victory. And so we was like, hey, let's take care of that landfill.
That's what's up, bro. Yes. Yes. Avengers assemble.
And so we could smell the landfill anywhere from 2 to 4 miles away. And we called the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality out there to test and hold them accountable. And we had some listening sessions within the city. It's like, if you can smell it, we want to hear about it. And we had a lot of people show up. The trash company showed up. Well, the landfill company showed up, and their CEO lost his composure, and it was all on film. But the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality ended up bringing them up on charges, and they shut down the landfill, and they revoked their license, which was the first time in over 20 years they had revoked someone's license. And so now that we have the landfill closed, it's physically still there. And so our current fight with citizens and an organization consisting of medical doctors and environmentalists from various universities in the area and social scientists. We're actually trying to get the people, because there's an elementary school at the bottom of the landfill and there's a community pretty much surrounding it. And so we're trying to get those people tested and establish a baseline for their health and wellness, so that 10, 15 years down the line, when that turns into a asthma or cancer cluster, we can have some type of recourse where they could go into court for justice,
Right.
And we also,
and that is amazing.
right, and we also made sure that in the original lawsuit with the landfill operators, that all evidence and everything presented in that court case could be used in following cases.
Yeah.
And so when we do environmental stuff, we have to hit it from all angles. We have to hit it from all angles, and we have to hit them hard.
And what I appreciate about this is that you're doing this work in the community and also through the NAACP out there, right? So that's, I mean, a great opportunity of seeing like great work for justice, environmental justice. And again, you are definitely an environmental avenger. So I appreciate
Okay, I think you all can see me and hear me, right?
Yes, Keisha.
Okay, I think I figured it out. I think my phone was too hot. I was making it too hot. So I did a few things, but yes, I have some things to say. Thank you all for all of your contributions. And I just might echo them, I'm not sure. I just wanted to go back to the quote or the reflection from this from when you started.
Yes.
About it's not our priority, or we don't care about the land that we walk on, these thoughts. And I'm brought to one thing that John said in his presentation the other week about it being seeming so far in the future, so far removed, that we're not getting active about it. We can look at media as well. What media? So I think we had a question about, which way can we begin to attack this thing? I think media. I don't think that it's in the media. I believe the younger people that are into social media and videos and documentaries and things like that, we did things around the McDonald's thing and the meat industry and all of these things that, cause people to look at what they're eating and things like that really brought changes. So I think that the media, it could be helpful in bringing that to the forefront. We also have to remember, I heard you all talking about historical, cultural things that have happened. And so I also work in the area of trauma. And one of the things about trauma is that you are like with Maslow, you're worried about what's right in front of you today, right? Your brain is not working on that other stuff.
That pyramid.
Besides that,
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right. Whatever's right in front of me, and I'm shutting off anything else, right? I can't even focus on that. My brain functioning is like what's right here, right today, what in control, right in the moment. And so many of us are on life support in that way, that's not something we're thinking about. Additionally, just, us fighting for and civil rights and all of the different eras of our fight has been for so many things, but environmental justice wasn't at the forefront of that. If we look at our history's past, we were fighting for voting and being free and these different things, and environmental stuff was not a part of that. So I ask that we be patient with one another and that we not shame or guilt, us that may not know, right? Like I said, people have those reflections, and I know that sometimes it can come from our community for people that have been enlightened, and that's with anything, right? Once we're enlightened, we want everyone to be enlightened right away, and we're not. And so we have to be patient. And like I was hearing Lafayette say, we have to hit it at all angles. And where you might be working, I might be working somewhere else on that particular thing in a different way, right? I think that's all I had for right now that I can read from my notes here.
No, that's appreciated. And girl, you don't need no notes. But what I wanted to say, Keisha, you are also a survivor with Katrina. I mean, that was like one devastating, you're talking about environmental injustice, right? And so I just remember, I mean, I can still remember where I was. I mean, where I was sitting and just watching it on the news, and we were just like, oh my God, right? We cannot believe what's happening. Would you, I know we didn't talk about it beforehand, but like I said, this is a natural, organic discussion. Do you feel comfortable sharing some of your experience of how you were able to recover, right, from that very traumatic environmental injustice in so many ways, right? Where these man-made dams just collapse, right? To ruin neighborhoods of people, Black folks lived, all their lives and for generations.
Yeah, and I really appreciate Dr. Puja talking about all of the other stuff that we don't think about, as far as when she was talking about you don't go outside, you don't socialize, you don't, it affects your mental health. So Hurricane Katrina and the environmental disaster and trauma and injustice hurt a lot of things. And for me particularly, I evacuated. However, the fabric of my community, my culture, my familial ties were damaged, right? So I'm here now. Well, I work in San Diego, but I live in Mexico now for about 3 years. But being away from my family, big deal. And when I go back, I think John talked about it too. The areas I lived in, they're no longer there. They're not what I remember. So my past it doesn't exist except in my head. And so where you went to your corner store or your church or your school, and that
your
no
first
longer
elementary
exists,
school.
Or it still has that graffiti marking on it, and who knows what's inside of it, right? Black mold, and all kinds of other. So there are still areas that have not been recovered. That's correct. And so, yes, and we already know, again, the South has had a lot of statistics against it as far as health and things like, and injustices, period, right? And so you think about the people in those lower lying areas, and New Orleans is made like a bowl. And so the lower lying areas in the bowl, right, below sea level, were mostly people that were, lower socioeconomic, otherwise you were probably on higher ground. And those areas were not recovered or thought of, right? And so they already had injustices going on in their health. I think Mississippi and Louisiana had the worst health outcomes for, our things that are linked to our diet. And again, that's historical of what we decide to eat, And so, yes, it had a large impact. And my dissertation actually was on the resiliency of Hurricane Katrina survivors.
Yes.
And I was thinking about when I wanted to study that, I was thinking about why some seem to have recovered. And this is where I talk about, we can't shame and guilt people, right? Because we've been enlightened on different particular areas. I wanted to see, because I saw on social media, this is the way I kept in touch with my community through virtual means, but I saw some were depressed. Some were more behind than pre-Katrina, and then others were thriving. And I wanted to know what happened, what's the difference here, and of course that impacted people differently and they processed it differently. And so, yes, and so lots are scattered in other places. Others have returned to a home I think they thought was the same, and it was disappointed that it wasn't. And I too went home for about 1 year thinking I was going home to my home, but it was not the same.
Wow.
It was not the same.
And
so thank
like
you for asking.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is relevant, right? So like you're like a real, example of someone that, experience exactly what we work and fight for, right? And how you, like you said, you're a resiliency coach, right? Based on your own trauma and experience. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. And I also agree with you as far as meeting people where they're at and being open and inviting people to be part of it. At the end of the day, environmental justice has not been always sexy, if you will, right? Or appealing like for, racial and social justice, but there still have been people in our community that has constantly, work on these issues. And so now that we understand it more so, I think there's an intersectionality in all aspects. I think that that matters. So another thought, since we're talking about this, is my question is, why would you say it's important for Black and Brown, the BIPOC community members, lead the environmental and justice movement? John, did you want to start us off on that?
There's more of us, and it affects us more. I mean, we're in the front. We need to stop them and take charge of our own destiny, because no one else is going to do it for us. Or if they do, it's too slow, like Nina Simone said in her song "Mississippi Goddamn." It's too slow. We have to step up to the plate, and I agree with Dr. Keisha about meeting people where they are. But now that we meet them there, let's educate them more on what we know. Let's share information, and let's move forward. And I think part of it also is, and this is why I ran for Congress, is we need to get more politically active, because unfortunately that's where the power is. And we need to get there and change the system. It's not going to change on its own. It's not in their benefit. Doesn't benefit them to have things change, but it does us. So we need to make that change happen.
I wish you would say that again, because I mean, one of the things we do on this show is the public policy, right? So our public power policy. And we have seen here in San Diego and throughout the county that lifting your voices, like you said, for the people. And that's, again, I want to give a shout out to Monica Montgomery running for council president, but lifting our voices out for the injustices actually does work. Because it is more of us that they're supposed to represent than it is of them. And actually, Councilmember Vivian reminds us on a regular basis that like we're her boss, right? Those that, your constituents who vote you in are the ones you're supposed to work for, not the big conglomerate. And unfortunately, that historically has been how things has been ran here in San Diego, right? And so some people may be okay because they may get 5,000, 25, 50,000 here, but it's not benefiting our community and paying the highest utility rates, for example, right? It's not in our best community to have, all these appliances ran on gas, right? I mean, because if you think about it, San Diego, we're coastal. We're right here on the ocean. And so ocean is like a natural purifier, but yet San Diego ranks 6th for the worst air pollution. And El Centro, which is part of, the San Diego County and East County, they're the worst. They have the worst air quality. And so that speaks volumes, it speaks volumes for our lifestyle. It speaks volumes for the energy sources that we're using. So anyone else want to chime in on why the Black, Brown, BIPOC community should be leading the environmental justice movement?
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
In doing the racial justice, as you talked about, in the social justice talks that I had a Black person say, it's their problem. They caused it. And I learned in John's presentation as well, the top percent of wealthy folks make the most pollution, and they're ruining our environment more and affecting those in a lower socioeconomic status. And so the Black person on that call said they're doing it. They started it. They created it. They need to fix it. And I didn't, of course, like you said, I meet people where they are. I'm not going to call you out because we're needed in different positions, right? Play your different positions. But what I will say is that I don't want to put my future in their hands any longer. I think that we should be leading it right? I want to be the
Real
director.
talk.
I want to be the leader. I want to help you do it, right? I want to tell you what I need you to do, but I definitely don't want to carry all the load, because I'm not the one that's probably, you know, contributing to that load, but I definitely don't want to give my power away as well. And so, yes, we need to lead. And that's the reason why I think that we should be leading.
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that comment?
I'll throw my hat in the ring on that. All right, so when we start talking about environmental justice, there's a intersectionality that must happen, and people have to realize that that politics is a part of that. Politics is a part of everything, and including church. I'm also a minister, y'all. All right, so
speak on it.
just to let y'all know.
Reverend Doctor, literally Reverend Doctor.
All right, so the most impacted, that's true. Politically active, that is true. But let's drill down into politically active a little more. In my city of Petersburg, the mayor appoints people to various boards. Right now, there's 60 seats that are not occupied. On the state level, there's only 700 that aren't occupied by the government. And that's by people not applying for them, and it's a volunteer position, no money involved in it. But what I'm trying to do with our NAACP chapter is plug people into those positions. Right. Not only so they can let us know what's going on, but so they can see how the game is played, so they can start their unofficial training to run for office one day, so they can build those relationships, so that we can actually start the process of developing organic leadership from within the community, with community in mind. And I'm also on the board of directors for the Economic Development Authority for the city of Petersburg. And the things that you can do there, that's where the money is. That's where all the developers come. And so there's a guy developing a hotel, has a $12 million gap between his funding, what he has and what he needs. And so he's come to the EDA to see if we can get it for him. Will he get it? Most likely. But he's not going to get it until he agrees to hire a certain amount of people from the city of Petersburg. We're 84% Black. He's not going to get that funding until he's partnered with a certified company from Petersburg. And so it's those things that we have to do and understand to build power in our community in order to fight economic justice. This was just with a developer. But when a power company comes into your area, you still have to have that same kind of clout, and you still need your people on those boards.
Power to the people.
Say again?
I said power to the people.
All the time, all the time, all the time. And it all matters. And it all matters. Because that went to, when you take a look at Flint, that was a board decision. Are we going to filter water like we traditionally do, or are we just going to throw some chemicals in there and treat it? Filter versus treat. And the treat costs about 90% less than the filtering of water. And we know how that turned out.
Right.
But still at the same time, don't think that Flint is the only place that has that going on, because water's been tested all across the United States, and we got it going on all over the place. But I would submit that I doubt that would have happened if you had people from the community on those boards. And so we have to literally take over everything that we can in order to protect our communities.
So can you say that again, please, sir?
You want the preacher voice?
Bring it, bring it.
We need.
Come on.
No, but we need to take over everything we can. We need to organize our communities for power. We need to establish power.
Absolutely. I think we all can agree with that. Go ahead, Puja. I see you want to share something. No, go ahead.
Add something to this conversation about leadership, and it's not just leadership. It's not only BIPOC leadership. It's also in as Lafayette was saying, it's in every level, you know, of nonprofit, government, private sector, where, and it's about perspectives. It's about bringing a different way of looking at the problem, bringing a different way of thinking about what the priority solutions are. So let me give you an example, also going back to the issue of urban forestry. So I'm trained as a scientist, and we're all taught that, you know, science is objective. There's no white perspective versus black perspective versus brown perspective. Like science, it's just facts. And yes, we look at the facts, but the question is, which facts are you going to place priority on? Which questions drive the studies, and which questions are the ones helping you make decisions? So let's take it back to an issue of urban forestry again. Urban, because we're talking about environmental climate justice and urban environments, urban forests, urban trees have loads and loads of benefits, right? Besides the fact that they sequester carbon, they hold water, they retain stormwater flooding, they filter out particulate air pollution. So there's lots of things that benefit everybody. But when you plant trees in a neighborhood, another thing that does is it raises the property values. So raising property values, is that a good thing or a bad thing in the eyes of the beholder, right? If you're a property owner, maybe it's good, but if you're a renter, it might be one more factor in you getting pushed out of a neighborhood, right? And so we have to look at the whole trajectory of if we're doing things that you know, that raise the property values, what, you know, is that going to result in gentrification and displacement? And that doesn't mean we don't do urban greening. That means we do it with an eye towards the possible consequences and start thinking about preventing those consequences while we're doing it. But that's a perspective that often gets overlooked, and it's using the same facts, but it's like, who values the fact, or how do you value that fact of increasing property values, and like thinking about what is that going to do in the long run, and can we figure out ways to have win-win situations where people are not displaced and they have healthy environments. Like, it makes us look for the yes and solutions when we have more voices and more life experiences at the table, and not just the one, you know, nobody wants to be the first one. Nobody wants to be the first Black or brown person on a board and be the first one and the only one, and then that board gets to say, oh, see, we've got diverse perspectives. It's, you know, if you're in a position of starting an organization or hiring or whatever, think about hiring more than, and you're trying to diversify from a predominantly white or a white only organization. Think about hiring cohorts of BIPOC people, because it's not just the one person that's going to represent all perspectives. It's bringing unique ways of looking at the problems. It's going to take that to really get solutions that work. And, you know, and if BIPOC people are not leading, then what are we doing? Then we're necessarily following, or we're being told what to do. And on one hand, like Dr. Keisha said, well, you know, the people who created the problem should be the ones to fix it. But again,
their accountability. Yeah. So I mean, so I think that
experiencing the problems that have to say how those problems need to be fixed.
Right. So I think there's accountability, right? So
nobody else than BIPOCs can say that. Nobody should say it on behalf of.
Right. So I think there's an issue of like accountability, as well as, you know, leading for the change that's necessary. And I think the two needs to come together. You know, so that's just one of my thoughts on that. So we're almost, guys, this has been a great discussion. You guys are definitely welcome to come back again. So I want to provide an opportunity for you guys to leave your thoughts on what you want our listeners and viewers to take away when we're looking at including equity, whether it's the message, including our communities, and the best way to get involved for this movement, as it does, you know, impact our health, our life, and everything else. So John, I'm going to go with you, then Keisha, you can have your point, and then Lafayette, you can close us out.
Well, two things. One, I would say definitely get politically active. And if you don't know how to get involved, get a hold of us and let us get you involved. Second, taking on what Dr. Puja just said about green spaces and one problem creating another, perhaps, is open yourself to the possibilities of learning something new. The way we're doing things, the way you may be doing things, the way you're raised, may not be the only way. Like the renter example, well, there's ownership. Maybe I'll be an owner instead of a renter. You know, little things like that you may not have considered because it wasn't part of your world. Just open your mind up, expand your horizon.
And part of that creativity that Lafayette was speaking about as well. Keisha.
I just want to say, representation is everything. Visibility is everything. When we tell people get involved, get politically active, get on those boards and those committees. Again, these are things that we weren't able to do at one time. This doesn't come naturally. It wasn't taught. My family never said certain things to me. And so when I think, especially with, you know, the elections of just seeing Black women from a Black woman perspective and a Black girl, you know, seeing that when you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Okay, I want to be president of the United States, you know,
come on now.
Until you can see that, you know, so it's important for us, like you say, I started off like on my HOA board one time, you know, or, you know, just go to some kind of meeting and get on those committees, boards, or whatever. Start small, you know, your PTA, your soccer, but that representation of someone seeing you, like Puja said, not one person, but I love that, a cohort, you know, let's take over, as Lafayette talked about. And so you might not know what's going on, you know, go in there, learn. But it's important for us, representation and visibility. And that's why I always show up, even if I might not be the environmental justice
Avengers.
SME on this call, right? I'm still learning about a lot of it, but I showed up because it's important.
That's right.
It's important. And so show up.
That's right. I love it. Show up. So Puja, real quick, I'm gonna make sure that was your last thought, but if you have anything else you want to share, and then we'll allow Lafayette to take us out.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Just start showing up to those meetings, you know, 350.org and Sunrise, all those things, because we all know what it feels like to be othered, but bring some other people with you and just think of it as a learning experience of like, you know, I have a lot to learn, but I also have a lot to share. I have my lived experience and I have my perspective, and that's what these folks need. That's what this group needs. They don't have people like me. I just got to show up and just bring people with you, because I know everybody here knows what it's like to be the only voice that is representing a person,
a community of people, right?
Right. Yeah, most of the world, right? So
she said most of the world. I appreciate that. Puja said, you know, most of the world is brown, right? Thanks for putting that in perspective. So like we do know that 50% of it is showing up. So thank you guys for giving a call to action, right, to our viewers and our listeners. Lafayette, would you like to kind of wrap this discussion up on some thoughts that we can leave to our viewers?
My last thought, and this is based on me knowing that you have a lot of leaders not only participating but viewing at this time. And this is going to harken back to what Dr. Keisha was talking about. I will say that people with trauma make bad decisions. And the more you heal, the better your decision-making process is. The way that relates to what we're talking about is that every event, every meeting have some sort of trauma remediation built into it. And it's not going to be the beginning end all, but what it will do, it will start people healing. And with that healing, they'll make better decisions, take better care of themselves, take better care of their family and their community. Because people cannot fight unless they are in a space. I mean, if it's go to a meeting about environmental justice, or go to work to feed your kids, or to deal with something and you think you already have no voice, there needs to be a narrative change. And that narrative change comes through trauma remediation.
Love it.
And so heal thyself.
Yes,
Or better yet, go to someone like Dr. Keisha. Yeah, but just you got to heal your people in order for them to fight.
I love it. I love it. So you guys, this is our, environmental justice Avenger panel. Next week, we will have the next generation. So we're doing another show on our youth. You definitely want to hear the work they're doing from a social, racial, as well as an environmental movement. They're like, it's about that training up our bench and mentoring our next generation on these fights for justice. So thank you, everyone. Also, shout out to Dr. Follow and our health professionals from last show. They definitely got the Sunshine Award, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.